Spider-Man 2 is an amazing action-adventure game with fast-swinging, fast-kicking, ass-thwipping action, a great story, and graphics so good they're photorealistic enough they could be used as establishing shots for sitcoms. It's a classic computer game of no small amusement, but what struck me most about Spider-Man 2 is the open world component and how well it's been implemented. And I realised that Spider-Man is perfectly suited to open world shenanigans. You see, with open world games, certain problems can arise when it comes to open world activities and side content. Problems like urgency, relevancy, and indeed tedium. Oh boy. But Spider-Man 2 goes a long way to solving these problems. So the open world is a mainstay of the gaming landscape these days. The go anywhere, do anything approach is still a big draw. Sprawling kingdoms, vibrant cities, and big empty planetoids. And by now I'm sure you're all well aware of the usual tropes of the genre. Collectathons, side quests, enemy bases, rounding up runaway varmints, what have you. See that tower? You can activate it. And yes, Spider-Man 2 does contain all those same typical trappings that you might expect to find in any open world game. The kinds of features that today might be considered derivative or outdated. However, for me, I'm willing to give Spider-Man 2 a pass, because the open world antics in Spider-Man 2 feel natural and appropriate. And I think a major part of why that is because Spider-Man needs to be an open world game. The character Spider-Man needs New York City, and so a Spider-Man game needs a virtual New York City. Because when you picture Spider-Man, the first thing you think of is him swinging around New York City. I think a huge part of Spider-Man's power comes from the tall buildings of New York. I mean, not literally, but his unique method of traversal is a quintessential part of him. I mean, he wouldn't be as an effective crime fighter in my neck of the woods. A bungalow community of retirees. Barely any crime though, so. Except Myrtle's topiary love heart, which just looks like a massive ass. And speaking of community, that's another big part of why Spider-Man needs to be open world too. More on that in a minute. Anyway, a big, open, swing-aroundable New York is a must-have for a Spidey game, surely. So by necessity, Spider-Man just works as an open world. It just works. Now, broadly speaking, I think the crime-fighting superhero in general is really well suited to a sandbox-style game. But Spider-Man more so than most, I think. I mean, I don't imagine Insomniac's upcoming Wolverine game needs to be open world especially. I mean, I don't even know where Wolverine lives. San Francisco? I'll admit right now that I'm not a comic buff. And conversely, when I picture Wolverine, the first things I think of are claws, being a grumpus, sideburns, and lying on the bed remembering the good times. Nothing that's really conducive of open world exploration. I suppose you could have him driving around a city on his motorcycle, getting into fights and calling people bub. That might be cool. But it might not feel particularly different to any other open world game that features riding on a motorcycle and getting into fights. I think the reason so many clever games journalists say that playing Spider-Man makes you feel like Spider-Man is because only Spider-Man does what Spider-Man does, and nothing else feels like what Spider-Man does. Only playing a Spider-Man game can make you feel like what Spider-Man does. I think that's pretty clear. Riding on a motorcycle with your sideburns blowing in the wind doesn't make you feel like Wolverine, as far as I'm aware. So, let's talk about webs and the city. So this game implements both the swinging and the buildings perfectly. Insomniac's New York is so incredibly rich and vibrant from top to bottom, and there's no downgraded puddles in sight. From the reflective surfaces of glazed skyscrapers in the financial district to the crumbling brickwork of downtown's domiciles, from quiet suburban streets to dirty, pissy alleyways. It's almost stupid, the level of detail that's injected into this game, given the amount of time you'll spend hurtling past it at high speed as you swing around. Which feels amazing, by the way. Improving upon the already fluid and fun traversal of the first game, the swinging in this game is even more fluider and consequently more funner. And the newly added web wings allowing you to glide around the city actually makes you feel like Batman. And, in addition to its beautiful environment and satisfying traversal mechanics, Spider-Man 2 contains that other all-important open-world ingredient, a tiny dash of jank. Not too much, because that'll break the game, but just enough to keep things interesting and hilarious.
Don't mind me, just having a look around.
So you've got fun traversal, a stunning environment, and a bit of jankiness. Oh, and the combat is great too. And as is customary, it's loaded with entertaining activities and diversions for the player to encounter while on said adventure. And one of the things that stood out to me is how all the side quests and extra content you partake in make sense for the character and feel cohesive with the broader story. The side missions in Spider-Man 2 feel justified and relevant. So to highlight why this is important, let's take a quick look at some recent Final Fantasy games. In Final Fantasy 15, you play as Noctis, a crown prince who can wield a special magic power possessed only by his royal ancestors. Exiled from your throne amid a war, you soon find yourself collecting tomatoes for the local cafe. In Final Fantasy 16, you play as Clive Rossfield, the eldest son of an archduke imbued with the spirit of a godlike fire demon, thrust into a bitter journey of revenge. And that's why you find yourself fetching the wood needed to make a shed or something for some local peasants.
I couldn't persuade you to fetch me some timber, could I?
In Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, you play as a chemically engineered super soldier on a race against time to stop an evil corporation and another chemically engineered super soldier and his mum from destroying the planet. So that's why you find yourself luring out an old lady's missing chickens with an oil can on a string. These side quests are not optimal. They're not relevant to the protagonist's abilities or their circumstances. I tell you who they might be suitable for though, the Spider-Man. Fetching tomatoes for a New York deli is something I can see Spidey doing for sure. Doing favours for the locals is Spider-Man's thing, because he's the friendly neighbourhood Spider-Man, isn't he? So these kind of community betterment activities that you typically find in open world games fits right in with Spider-Man's whole vibe. So while the tasks you're asked to perform in Spider-Man 2 sometimes feel like busy work, I didn't really mind because it feels in keeping with the Spider-Man universe. It's the whole great power, great responsibility mantra, as opposed to the incidental responsibility assumed by the sulky, seldom-speaking male leads of Final Fantasy games. But there is a very strong emphasis on helping the community in this game. No task is too small for Spider-Man if it helps his community, and actually there's a lot of criticism directed at this game for being overly wholesome, with which I sort of agree, although I do think that's kind of Spidey's whole vibe. I mean, I'm no comic buff, but of all the superheroes, I feel like Spider-Man is the one to hand a singed baby back to a worried mother, or get a singed cat down from a tree and say, "Here you go, ma'am." He's a wholesome guy. But in fact, if you're looking for a fun way to self-destruct, then I've got a game for you. Take a sip of whiskey every time someone says the word community in the Bebop trumpet side mission, and you might quickly find yourself married to a dumpster in Brazil on a boat headed to Snake Island. True story.
Community. Community.
Communities. Community. Community.
Community.
Communities. Community.
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 Now, dissonance between the story and side quest is quite common in open worlds in general, but Insomniac counters it by underpinning every activity you do with helping people in danger or bettering the community. Take Mind Meddler Mysterio's Mysteriums. These are your typical open world combat arena or coliseum that are there to challenge your fighting skills, your web slaps and spider chops, what have you. But this is a Spider-Man game, so each one has a helpless civilian trapped inside for you to save. Likewise, there are numerous hunter drones to be found throughout the city. This time they're there to test your gliding skills. And again, what in any other game might perhaps be an arbitrary series of horse races, here is a quest to locate and warn civilians targeted by Kravitz the Hunter. And by the end of the game, even the very enemies you're fighting are indeed possessed New York residents in need of rescue. Body snatched by venom, you have to punch them out of their symbiote shells to save them. He'll be fine. Now that might seem like a simple addition, and you might not even pay that much attention to it. But by frequently reminding the player of the people that are in danger, it gives the side quests a little bit more of a point and more of a story-driven function, and it keeps the game focused as a whole. And so consequently it feels a bit more rooted in reality. Well, as much as two guys with spider-like superpowers fighting aliens and an entire army of insane hunters equipped with cutting-edge weaponry can feel rooted in reality anyway. And amidst all the wild comic book action, Spider-Man still manages to find time to get injured civilians to ambulances, which he does quite frequently. And this is a great little touch. It's an often overlooked aspect of video games. Rarely are you carrying NPC pedestrians to safety. In games, saving the world is typically a broad strokes approach. Defeat the bad guy, destroy the mothership, or just nuke the world from orbit is another way. So saving the world one wounded person at a time is quite a novel approach. Again, it punctuates the non-linearity of the open world with a bit of purpose. The paramedics don't seem to share your sense of duty though. But the people of New York are on the whole very appreciative of your actions. Another really nice detail in this game is being able to flaunt your celebrity on the streets and get some kudos from the locals. It humanises the world, and it makes a nice change from other open world games where the majority of the population are completely oblivious to your heroic deeds. And when you're not saving the people, you're saving the bees, which is good, that's admirable. Okay, to be honest, the Emily May Foundation experiments are among some of the few activities that feel a little bit fudged in there, with the flying robot bee drones, watering the plants and riding a bicycle to charge it or whatever, environmental sciencey stuff. But you know, PP is something of a scientist, he cares about the environment, so it's fair enough. Do people call him PP? Like I said, I'm not a comic buff. And it feels to me like Insomniac took a bit of care to make all the side missions fit. What with one of the core themes of the game being healing the world. So saving the bees and all that, you know, you've got to save those bees. And actually I really enjoyed the part where PP, having rescued some bees from a bunch of crooks, begins to lecture them about the importance of bees and then just gives up.
Why do you even care about them bees?
Do you know how many plants exist because of bees? They play a critical role in...
You don't care. Not that much.
It's classic PP, but of all the features of any open world game that are undeniably fudged in there, it's the collectibles. I mean, who can forget such memorable collectathons as finding 50 pieces of paper in GTA 5? Or finding 200 pigeons in GTA 4? Or finding 50 oysters, 50 horseshoes, 50 snapshots, graffiti tags, hidden packages, stunt jumps, and what have you in GTA San Andreas. Collectibles are an easy way, it seems, for developers to add interest to their worlds and get the players moving around to all the different corners of the map. But collectibles can also feel lazy and can get pretty tedious for the player. And this sort of shiz is all too easy to abandon or even just ignore completely. I mean, I think I found like one dinosaur bone in Red Dead Redemption 2 before I completely forgot that they existed. But Spider-Man 2 does a pretty good job of working collectibles in without them feeling like a chore or cramping the game's style too much. And that's by 1, keeping the number of collectibles relatively small, and 2, it makes them easily locatable, either via the map or via icons popping up organically as you explore. But most importantly, they peppered in a bit of intrigue and a little sub-story that progresses with each new thing you collect. And I was actually motivated to collect things, the memory crystals, the spider bots and the drones, because I was looking forward to seeing what happened when I collected them all. Now, whether or not you thought the payoff at the end was worth it is down to you. I mean, I personally didn't know what I was seeing upon completion of most side quests. As I said, I'm not a comic buff, and there seemed like they'd thrown in some pretty deep cuts as rewards for your efforts. But the efforts were small, and the cutscene rewards, once I looked up what they were about, were pretty cool. And it goes without saying that all of your actions relating to all of the above are rewarded with experience points, tokens, and tech parts, which you can spend on sweet new skills and abilities, which allow for new playstyles, and sweet new suits that allow for new street styles. Ah yeah. Another problem that other open world games suffer from, but Spider-Man 2 does not, is the problem with urgency. Urgency is quite a common problem in games where player freedom is generous, but at the same time, there's a deadly threat looming in the background. There's the frequent occurrence of delaying the all-important task of saving the world in order to participate in less pressing matters. Take for example Cyberpunk 2077. There you've got Keanu Reeves' ghost inside your brain frame, and he's going to erase your memories and your life, so you need to get him out of there as soon as possible. But first, let's just do some street boxing and taxi driving. Or, in Fallout 4, someone kidnaps your son right before you're frozen for 210 years. And when you wake up, you have to go and look for him, but instead you just end up helping Preston protect settlements and... oh wait, I guess that's not that urgent. Anyway, Spider-Man 2 manages to mitigate that feeling of procrastination by tying the passage of time to the main story missions. So time only progresses when certain critical events transpire. So it kind of feels like collecting Spider-Bots and saving the city is all in a day's work. And when the stakes do ramp up towards the end of the game, you're actually locked out of the side content and forced to confront the more immediate danger. And then the developers also offer up windows of opportunity for you to do the side quests at your leisure, with Miles and Peter occasionally remarking how they have free time to tend to other activities.
Well, I'm looking for Harry. I should check in on some other things.
So even when you're titting about helping some preppy kids with their homework, Miles will comment on how it's a welcome change of pace from fighting aliens.
To an alien invasion.
Which it kind of is, I guess. I mean, I'd sooner be fighting aliens, to be honest, but it's nice. Because even at its most tangential, Spider-Man 2 still feels like Spider-Man. And it helps that the gameplay activities always involve utilising Spidey's skill set of swinging and shooting webs, aside from the occasional bike ride. And in most cases, it feels pretty organic, and nothing outstays its welcome. You could even make an argument for the side stuff being more fun than the main story quest, because it strips away all of that story stuff, as good as that may be, and leaves you with just the fun core fighting and traversal mechanics. Now generally, I think the open world of Spider-Man 2 is really well done, and it complements the main story arc wonderfully well. And to me, Spider-Man 2 felt like the first open world game in a long time where the story missions and all the side activities were tight, cohesive, and relevant, and above all, enjoyable. And yeah, it's not on the scale of your Breath of the Wilds and your Elden Rings, but again, I think that's to its benefit. At no point does Spider-Man 2 feel like a slog. I don't think I'll ever get my hands on the golden dog poo awarded for finding all 9,000 Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild, and I don't think I'll ever find all of the Chaos Rings in Elden Ring either. But that's fine, those games offer amazing experiences, and arguably they're both perfect in their own way. But nothing I've played matches the compact, streamlined and optimised approach to open world design that's offered by Spider-Man 2. And I know it sounds kind of reductive to say that I think a game is better than another based on brevity, but that's quite important to me. Spider-Man 2 didn't waste my time. And I know a lot of gamers will happily turn a blind eye to poor quality side content in open worlds by pointing out the fact that it's optional and you don't have any grounds to complain about it because you're not forced to do it in the first place. But I think that's a bit of a weak argument. If the music in a video game was bad, you'd complain about it, wouldn't you? You wouldn't just say, oh, well, the music is terrible, but I can just turn it down in the options and put a podcast on instead. I mean, you could do that. It's the only way to play Dragon Quest XI. But it's not ideal, is it? You want everything in the game to be good. And I think Spider-Man 2 just gets so much right. For a game that's such a high-profile first-party PlayStation title, featuring a beloved IP, it has to cater to all kinds of players, young and old alike, of all different skill levels, from hardcore lore hounds who think the swinging is too easy, to little kids who've been raised on Marvel movies and just want to run up walls. And then it has to feel like there's enough content to warrant the AAA £70 price tag, but also not for it to feel like it's padded with pointless filler that's only been put there to warrant the AAA £70 price tag. It's a difficult needle to thread, but overall I think they did a pretty good job. Good game, 7 out of 10. Like and subscribe.